How does Satan attempt to seize the daily scepter of power, seat, and authority? Introduction. The description of Satan in the prophetic symbolism of Revelation 12 pictures him as a great red dragon and having 7 heads and 7 crowns upon his heads. Revelation chapter 12 verse 3. These crowns reveal Satan's determination to rule, to be a king over a kingdom, and to wear the crown and hold in his hand the daily scepter of power, seat, and authority. Great Controversy, page 507. Satan's agents are constantly working under his direction to establish his authority and build up his kingdom. The 7 heads of the great red dragon and their 7 crowns represent a sequence of 7 attempts of Satan to establish his kingdom, past, present, and future. The number 7 is symbolic, representing completeness or a complete sequence in time from his rebellion in heaven until he will be destroyed in the lake of fire at the end of the millennium. The 7 heads are also symbolic. The Bible provides its own key to interpret the heads. The 2 keys which interpret the symbol of heads are found in Revelation chapter 17, verses 9 and 10, and Daniel chapter 2, verses 35 and 44. In Revelation 17, verses 9 and 10, the first key states that the 7 heads are 7 mountains. But a mountain is also a prophetic symbol, and we therefore need a second key to unlock this combination lock. The second key is found in Daniel chapter 2, verse 35, in which Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel saw a symbolic mountain. Daniel explained in Daniel chapter 2, verses 35 and 44, that this symbolic mountain represents a kingdom, God's kingdom. Daniel chapter 2, verse 35 and 44. The stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom. Therefore, we understand that the symbolic head is the same as a symbolic mountain, both of which represent literal kingdoms. The entire focus of the great controversy between Christ and Satan is over the possession of the kingdom. Who shall hold the daily scepter of power? In Revelation 17, verses 9 and 10, the concept that heads and mountains both represent kingdoms is reinforced by the following verse, where it reiterates or reinforces the concept by repetition, saying that the 7 heads are 7 mountains, and they are 7 kings. Revelation 17, verses 9 and 10. It is characteristic of prophetic symbolism to repeat at least twice the interpretive concept to give assurance of correct interpretation. 7 kings would of course represent kingdoms. What it is true that the Revelation 17 verses 9 and 10 verses provide a key verse to interpret the 7 heads of the beast of Revelation 13, that same key verse will also unlock the symbolic heads of the great red dragon. And here we have a picture of the dragon with the 7 heads and the crowns. This study is a study of the 7 heads of the great red dragon and those 7 crowns, or attempts to grasp the daily scepter of power in the past, as well as its end time efforts as the time comes for Jesus to return, and at last in the future as Satan seeks to wrest the holy city at the end of the millennium. Not until these 7 heads are fully understood can the Daniel 12 verse 11 timeline of the 1290 days be understood clearly. So here we are involved with 7 heads and a timeline again related to Daniel 12 verse 11 and part of the 1290 day. Therefore, this study is an explanation of Satan's 7 attempts to take the kingdom, a study of the 7 heads of the great red dragon. This study gives answer to the following questions regarding the 7 heads of the great red dragon of Revelation 12. What is represented by the first head? What is represented by the second head? So these are very, very important questions to answer. What is represented by the third head, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh head? What relationship exists between the 7 heads and the Daniel 12 timelines? And then the summary. Part 1. What is head number 1 of the great red dragon? Satan's first attempt to seize the daily scepter of power, seat, and authority was in heaven, when he established a rebellion and gained control over certain of the angels. This is one of the first concepts established in Revelation 12 concerning his long career. Revelation 12 verses 4 to 9. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and this cast them to the earth. And the great dragon was cast out into the earth, and his angel with him. Great Controversy, page 507. Satan is a mighty general who controls the mind of evil angels. Part 2. What is head number 2? Satan's second attempt to seize the daily scepter occurred in the Garden of Eden. By virtue of creation, the earth belonged to God. He gave this dominion of the earth over to Adam, Genesis 1 verse 26. When Adam through sin placed himself under Satan's control, he submitted the dominion of the earth into Satan's possession. Legally, the usurper gained dominion or the scepter of power and authority of this earth, and he appeared at heavenly council as its representative, as expressed in Job chapter 1. There he declared himself to be the God of this world, or the prince of this world. He protested the plan of salvation to the universe, claiming every human being to be his lawful captive. He complained bitterly when any soul was rescued from his grasp. The contest was over every human soul, whether it should be in Satan's dominion or in the kingdom of Christ. And this contest is still going on today. Satan's dominion prospered, so that in the days of Noah, only 8 persons retained integrity to God and entered the ark. It was Satan's intention to blot out the people of God from the entire earth, to establish a universal dominion, and thereby secure the earth as his planet for eternity. But God saved the human race just in the nick of time by sending the flood, which destroyed Satan's kingdom entirely as it existed prior to the flood. Part 3. What is head number 3? Satan's third attempts to seize the daily scepter began shortly after the flood in the plains of Shinar and the Tower of Babel. Patriarch and Prophet, pages 118-119. For a time, the descendants of Noah continued to dwell among the mountains where the ark rested. As their number increased, apostasy soon led to division. Those who desired to forget their Creator and to cast off the restraints of his law journeyed to the plain of Shinar. Here they decided to build a city and a tower, to found a monarchy or a dominion that should eventually embrace the whole earth. Thus their city would become the metropolis of a universal empire. But God did not intend that Babel should so quickly bring the whole earth under Satan's rulership. God separated the nations by confusion of tongues, and in this way Satan's purpose was thwarted. Genesis chapter 11. The land of Shinar, with its Tower of Babel, emerged at last as the great Babylon Empire, which gained universal dominion in the then known civilized world surrounding the people of God. But this earthly empire rose and fell. It reached its climax under Satan's strategy when he took captive God's people, the Jews, in 606 BC, with the intent and purpose that they should be obliterated, swallowed up, and lost in Babylon. But God delivered them and took them back to their homeland, where they rebuilt a temple in the city of Jerusalem. Therefore, the third head of the dragon was also thwarted by God and failed of its intended purpose. Part 4. What is the fourth head? Satan's fourth attempt to seize the daily scepter of power, seat, and authority was to take the king himself. If the king could be captured, the kingdom was assured. The life of Jesus here on earth was a long struggle for the daily scepter of power. Satan attempted to get the kingdom during the 40 days temptation in the wilderness. Matthew chapter 4 verses 8 and 9. Again the devil taketh him up into an exceeding high mountain, and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, and said unto him, All these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. And the crucifixion was the last great effort on Satan's part. This battle for the daily scepter was described as follows. And this is from Desire of Ages, page 687. Now the tempter had come for the last fearful struggle. For this he had been preparing during the 3 years of Christ's ministry. Everything was at stake with him. If he failed here, his hope of mastery was lost. The kingdom of the world would finally become Christ. He himself would be overthrown and cast out. But if Christ could be overcome, the earth would be Satan's kingdom, and the human race would forever be in his power. With this issue of the conflict before him, Christ's soul was filled with dread of separation from God. Satan told him that if he became the surety for the sinful world, the separation would be eternal. He would be identified with Satan's kingdom and would nevermore be one with God. But this forehead attempt to seize the scepter also ended with failure. At the resurrection, Jesus arose triumphant with his kingdom assured. Part 5. What was the fifth head of the dragon? After the resurrection, the Christian church was established. God's people inhabited Europe for the next 1900 years. Satan determined to seize the daily scepter of power of the governments of Europe and set up a counterfeit system by which God's true saints could be put to death. This system was known in prophecy as the little horn of Daniel 7, verses 20 to 25, and the beast of Revelation, chapter 13 to 20. And it referred to the European papal supremacy, which reigned over Europe for 1260 years, with the intent and purpose to destroy utterly all the saints of God. But again, this fifth attempt to establish a universal system under Satan's control failed. It failed because there was always those who kept touch with the Word of God. Through the efforts of the European Reformation and the French power which took the Pope captive in 1798, that scheme to take the scepter also failed in its universal objective. Part 6. What is the sixth head? We now live under the sixth head of the great red dragon. The deadly wound inflicted in 1798 is now being healed. The Pope is coming back to power. This is the subject of the Daniel 12 timelines. Papal supremacy number 2. Daniel 12 verse 7. 1260 literal days of persecution to induce all to come under one banner by keeping the mark of the beast, so that Satan can align all humanity under the scepter of power. Daniel chapter 12 verse 11, 1290 literal days of papal reign number 2, Revelation 13, in which the kings of the earth hand over the daily scepter of power to one man who is Satan's agent to destroy God's people. Daniel chapter 12 verse 12, 1335 literal days from a national Sunday law in the United States until God's people are delivered from a final universal death decree. The sixth head of the great red dragon is the present attempt, already in process, to destroy God's people and to establish a universal kingdom under Satan by common consent of the wicked. We have not seen the last of it yet. We have hardly seen the beginning, but we will see this sixth head attempt and will know that it is in full swing when the national Sunday law in the United States has been passed. Under this sixth head, many final crisis events transpire. the Sunday laws, the time of trouble, persecution, and at last under the sixth plague, the gathering of the kings of all the earth to legislate a universal death decree against God's people. These timelines of Daniel 12 brings Revelation chapter 16 of the seven last plagues, especially the sixth and the seventh, into clear focus. We cannot understand the Daniel 12 timelines without a clear view of Revelation chapter 16, 17, and 18. But we may understand that the sixth attempt to seize the scepter, even when Satan personates Christ and proclaims himself King of Kings, will also end in failure as the voice of God delivers the saints and brings that kingdom to its end. Satan personation of Christ. And we now read from the book Great Controversy, page 624. As the crowning act in the great drama of deception, Satan himself will personate Christ. Now the great deceiver will make it appear that Christ has come. In different parts of the earth, Satan will manifest himself among men as a majestic being of dazzling brightness, resembling the description of the Son of God given by John in the Revelation chapter 1 verses 13 to 15. The glory that surrounds him is unsurpassed by anything that mortal eyes have yet beheld. The shout of triumph rings out upon the air. Christ has come. The people prostrate themselves in adoration before him, while he lifts up his hand and pronounces a blessing upon them. His voice is soft and subdued, yet full of melody. In gentle, compassionate tones, he presents some of the gracious, heavenly truth which the Savior uttered. He heals the disease of the people, and then in his assumed character of Christ, he claims to have changed the Sabbath to Sunday and commands all to allow the day which he has blessed. He declares that those who persist in keeping the seventh day are blaspheming his name by refusing to listen to his angels sent to them with light and truth. This is the strong, almost overmastering delusion. God's people, the 144,000, are the Mordecai in the gate who will not bow down and therefore are confronted with the universal death decree as in the day of Queen Esther's. They are a Daniel who continued to serve God, the God of heaven, and was thrown to the lions. If Satan could blot them from the earth, his triumphs would be complete. Great Controversy, page 618. Part 7. What is the seventh head of the dragon? Satan's last and final attempt to seize the daily scepter of power, seat and authority will be at the end of the millennium. Revelation chapter 20, verses 7 to 9. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall go forth to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle. The number of him is as the sands of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. And fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. The last attempt to seize the daily scepter is no more successful than those which preceded it. Nevertheless, each attempt signified as a head provides a graphic prophetic picture of Satan's mighty effort and rebellion against God and his people. In conclusion, Satan's 7 attempts to grasp the daily scepter are listed below. Number 1, war in heaven, dominion over fallen angel. Number 2, the fall of Adam in Eden to the flood. Number 3, the Tower of Babel and the confusion of languages. Number 4, temptation and crucifixion of Christ and his resurrection. Number 5, papal supremacy number 1, 538 to 1798. Number 6, papal supremacy number 2, which is future. This climaxes with the Battle of Armageddon and the voice of God, deliverance. Number 7, Battle of Gog and Magog, which ends with the lake of fire. Daniel chapter 12 verse 11 timeline describes Satan's sixth attempt to grasp the daily scepter, as he first takes it away from the kings of the earth and places it with his representative on earth, the abomination of desolation, and then personates Christ visibly in the role of King of Kings, wearing the crown and holding the scepter as though he had won the kingdom at last. Part 8, what relationship exists between Revelation 12 and Daniel 12? The 7 heads of the great red dragon of Revelation 12 explain in detail the nature and purpose of Satan as he wages the great controversy. His nature is to persecute and destroy God's people particularly, and to establish his universal empire on this planet. It is his purpose to get a unanimous consent by Earth's inhabitants so that he can legally claim this planet as his own before the universe. To do this, he must destroy God's people. This persecution of God's people at the end of time is the subject of the timelines of Daniel 12. The nature and purpose of Satan is registered in the following scriptures. Revelation 12:4, to devour a child as soon as it was born. Revelation 12:13, he persecuted the woman. 12:17, the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed which keep the commandments of God. And verse 12, chapter 14, and have the faith of Jesus. The dragon gave him, the beast of Revelation 13, his daily scepter of power, seat, and authority, verses 3 and 4. And verse 7 of chapter 13, and it was given him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Verse 17, that no man might buy nor sell. And verse 15, as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Chapter 12 of Daniel, verse 7, he shall have accomplished to scatter, persecute, and destroy the power or the hand of the holy people. Daniel 12, verse 11, the abomination that maketh desolate or persecutes, set up or establish. Daniel 12, verse 12, blessed is he that waited it out. Although it is Satan's purpose, according to his 7 heads, to get a universal empire over which he shall reign as King of Kings in his personation of Christ, yet there will be 144,000 whom he cannot touch, and who will be delivered by the voice of God. His present and near future attempt, as described in the 3 timelines of Daniel 12, will not be any more successful than have those of the past.